And later their families left Far West. Most of them went to Richmond in Ray County, just to the south. Unfortunately, these dissenters told the local Missourians of what had happened to them and what had taken place in Far West. Reports by these dissenters about their treatment in Far West did much to fuel the flames of antagonism against the Latter-day Saints.
July 4th of 1838 was a day that the Saints will long remember in Far West. This was a day of celebration and a day that will well remember Sidney Rigdon. Parley P. Pratt was there. He recorded in his autobiography the events of the day. It was marvelous. There was a parade organized, there was a band, there was music. They paraded through town. And of course where they were headed was to the temple. They laid the cornerstones. Edward Partridge laid a stone, the deacons laid a stone. They went that far with that. And then there was a Sidney Rigdon, represented the first presidency of the church, and stood up and gave a talk. Sidney doesn't, he was probably feeling his oats at this time and gave one of the most inflammatory speeches of his lifetime. In a sense, it was like throwing gasoline on the fire. He had declared within his speech how the rights of the saints had been infringed upon in Jackson County, Missouri, and they had equal rights with anyone else in town. And he felt that they had been abused under those rights, and that they in Far West were not going to let that happen to them. They were going to defend their rights even unto death.
We have proved the world with kindness. We have suffered their abuse without cause, with patience, and have endured without resentment until this day. But from this day and this hour, we will suffer it no more. That mob that comes on us to disturb us, it shall be between us and them a war of extermination. For we will follow them till the last drop of their blood is spilled, or else they will have to exterminate us. For we will carry the seat of war to their own houses and their own families, and one party or the other shall be destroyed.
There were numerous causes for the conflicts that took place in northern Missouri in 1838. We can't overlook the fact that when Joseph Smith arrived on March 14th, 1838, that sent a real red flag to the Missourians. For all these years, although Missourians and Mormons had lived together, the church headquarters was still Kirtland, Ohio. But now that Joseph Smith had come to northern Missouri, that signaled the fact that the church was now headquartering in Caldwell County. That did not go well with the local citizenry. Also, in 1836, when Caldwell County was created, the Missourians basically intended for that county to remain an isolated Mormon county, exclusively for Mormon occupation. However, it didn't take long for the Mormons to not only occupy Caldwell County, but to spill over into Daviess County to the north, and Carroll County to the southeast, and even other surrounding counties. And clearly the Missourians saw that as a violation of their agreement to create Caldwell County for the Mormons.
The best example of the Latter-day Saints' growing political power in Missouri, and the way that Missourians and others felt threatened by that power, is the Election Day fight that broke out in Gallatin in August of 1838. Peniston, who was a Mormon hater for many years already, was running for the state legislature and knew very well that if the Saints in Daviess County voted, he wouldn't probably stand a very good chance. And for this reason, he and some thugs, fortified by that Election Day tradition of alcohol, got into a good fight with the Latter-day Saints. And the Saints who were there to vote were in no mood to be bullied around anymore. These were some of the toughest of the early Saints, and they were ready to have the fight. And this unfortunate event unleashes, again, the emotions that are very powerful on both sides. You have the Saints who feel like their ancestors have given their best blood to create a land of the free, where they can worship as they please, where the Constitution says that there can be no restrictions made by Congress on their ability to exercise their religious conscience. And where the state should guarantee those rights, and where they're trampled on, the governor of the state should rush to their aid. And so it's very frustrating for the saints to have a governor who is not only unwilling to help them, but one of the perpetrators of the campaign against them. And on the other hand, you have Missourians whose fears are not altogether unfounded. As the saints gather in numbers, their political, economic, and social power becomes considerable. And for Missourians who come from a different kind of culture, a more individualistic ethos, a slave-holding culture, they perceive significant threats from the Latter-day Saints.
There is great excitement at present among the Missourians. They are continually chafing us and provoking us to anger, if possible, one sign of threatening after another. But we do not fear them, for the Lord our God, the Eternal Father, is our God, and Jesus is our Savior. We have been driven time and time again, and that without cause, and smitten again and again, and that without provocation. We will endure it no longer. If the great God will arm us with courage, with strength, and with power to resist them in their persecutions, we will not act on the offensive, but always on the defensive.
After the Election Day fight at Gallatin, the Mormon War in Missouri, as it's been called by some, really develops and escalates. The saints living in DeWitt, toward the central part of the state, are expelled from there. On the 25th of October, 1838, a pitched battle occurs at Crooked River, where Samuel Bogart, a longtime antagonist of the Latter-day Saints, and a militia company under his direction, ambushes this militia company of Latter-day Saints. And so what you've got is an actual civil war in the state of Missouri. Militiamen for the state fighting against each other in different companies, and trying, both of them, to assert what they believe are their rights, their property rights, their constitutional rights to free exercise and so forth.
Within 3 days, word reached Jefferson City about this battle. Unfortunately, the reports that reached Governor Boggs were that the entire Bogart company had been annihilated by the Mormons. When Boggs heard this, he found just cause in his mind to now say the Mormons must be exterminated, or in other words, driven from the state. Mormons, I think, have looked at Boggs thinking he's a bloodthirsty killer. That basically what he was saying is now Mormons must be totally annihilated or killed. I think we have to probably rethink that interpretation. Boggs was not a bloodthirsty killer. He was a family man. I believe he was a God-fearing man. But in his mind, the Mormon problem had caused him enough problem to say it's time they be removed. And I think we have to look at the extermination order as a removal order, not as one to totally annihilate the Latter-day Saints. Later, Governor Boggs said that he issued the extermination order to preserve the peace. And I think we have to recognize that in 1838, extermination meant maybe a little bit differently than what it means today. Webster's dictionary says in 1828 that exterminate means to drive from within one's borders. So clearly I think he and his commanding officers in the field felt like they must remove the Mormons, not necessarily kill them. But if they didn't go, of course, they would have resorted to firmer and stricter tactics.
As tension began to mount between the Saints and the Missourians, Joseph Smith had asked the Saints that they might gather towards far west for refuge and protection. The settlements, the outlying settlements, of which there were many at the time, most of them responded positively. One settlement, known as Hahn's Settlement, one of the earlier settlements in the area, Jacob Hahn had established a mill on a creek there, and what the members of the settlement, around 400 people in number, had sent Jacob into Far West and to find out, how serious was this call to come to Far West. Joseph had admonished him, and Jacob Hahn, to gather the saints into Far West, that there was a danger of threat. But Jacob sort of persisted on Well, if we protect ourselves and we have a plan set out and